My perspective is a little bit different because I spent my entire career in the military. I was a criminal investigator and a counterintelligence agent for the Air Force, and prior to that a pilot. And the way that I view the issue of Guantanamo is from the viewpoint of what's best for the security of the United States and also what's best for our troops and what's going to be the tools that we're going to use to stop terrorist attacks or to keep our country safe. And my experience and why Guantanamo has become so important to me is because when I was in Iraq and I was overseeing interrogators and I was overseeing the interrogations of foreign fighters who had come there in droves, the number one reason I heard that foreign fighters gave for coming there to fight was because of the torture and abuse that had occurred at Abu Ghraib and at Guantanamo Bay. And these statistics were compiled and they were briefed to every new interrogator who came to my unit that torture and abuse and the symbols of Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay was Al-Qaeda's #1 recruiting tool. And so it became very apparent to every one of us there that Al-Qaeda was using this very effectively against us. And so, I believe, and Senator McCain has even said this, that our adversaries and Al-Qaeda will use Guantanamo Bay as a symbol of the America that is hypocrite. And that is exactly one of Al-Qaeda's strategic goals, is to prove that we are hypocrites. And when we do things like hold people without giving them rights to due process or indefinite detention or use torture and abuse, we play right into their strategic goal or objective, which is to prove that we're hypocrites. And that allows them to recruit new fighters. And so that's one of the reasons why, at least for me, closing Guantanamo Bay is so important. In the military, we've been dealing with terrorism long before 9/11. There was the Beirut bombing in the 80s. We had Khobar Towers. We had the USS Cole. And so for the military, dealing with terrorism, the way that we addressed that threat is we educated people, we trained them, and that took the fear out of it. And then we went back about our business without compromising our principles. But the difference that we took after 9/11 is that we compromised our principles and we changed them to stop terrorist attacks. And we did that out of fear, and I believe partially from my experience in Iraq, out of prejudice. Prejudice against Arabs and Muslims whose culture we didn't understand. If we want to close Guantanamo, I think one of the tools that we have to use, and this comes from my experience in advocating against torture, is probably the one that most people would not typically think that we should use on the left, and that is one of patriotism. And what I found on the torture debate is that it was very hard to move people morally, which surprised me because I thought that would be easy, and I thought that was the most important issue in the debate about torture. But it turns out that when I would convince people that we shouldn't torture people, it typically was because I could prove that I could get the same information faster without torture. And I think the same thing about Guantanamo. We have to prove to people that the grading criteria is different, which is that closing Guantanamo keeps us safer versus leaving it open. And to do that, we have to change the language that we use to describe this conflict. It's not about stopping terrorist attacks, it's about stopping terrorist recruitment. Because stopping terrorist attacks is playing whack-a-mole for the next 100 years. They can indefinitely recruit new fighters. When we stop terrorist recruitment, that's when Al-Qaeda begins a slow death. And that's when we can consider ourselves to be winning. And closing Guantanamo is crucial to that strategy.